Bills Mafia. On today's Air Raid Hour pregame, we will be breaking down what we expect to see from the Bills this afternoon as they take on the Denver Broncos in the NFL Wild Card Round. Injury updates, key matchups, and our pregame superlatives are all coming up. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour pregame show, playoff edition, as the Buffalo Bills take on the Denver Broncos today in the wild card round. The chat is already bumping. Scott K coming in saying Bills Mafia, let's go. Autumn RE, go morning and go Bills. Chris S, go Bills. Charles G, good morning. Just a tip of canoe coming in saying hosting a morning show must throw off your morning poops. The key, and it's difficult for me because this is 6 a.m. out here in Phoenix, and I usually typically wake up about 4:15, 4:30 to start prepping. The key is just to not have a coffee until after this show. So once this show goes off air, I'll be percolating my first coffee of the morning. But it's playoff time, Dave, which means you win, you advance, you lose, you go home. And the Buffalo Bills have a pretty tall task today, right? It's not your typical 7 seed, in my opinion, in the Denver Broncos. They are led by a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, but they also have one of the best, if not the best defense in football. And their team is littered with a number of all pros. First teamers, Quinn Miners, Patrick Surtain, return man Marvin Mims, and then second teamers in Nick Bonito and Zach Allen. So a very talented Denver Broncos team that is also surging at the right time.
They are, and this isn't the Mason Rudolph-led Steelers from a year ago, right? I mean, that was kind of a gift for the Bills. They also, obviously last year the Steelers were playing without TJ Watt in that game against the Bills. And so this is a different animal this year. I know Bo Nix is a rookie, but for some reason this game really makes me nervous. I think Bo Nix, he's not going to win Rookie of the Year, but I think in a lot of other seasons he would have the numbers. And obviously, dragging that team to the playoffs based on the expectations that team had this year, which was middling at best, I would say. I don't think many people really predicted the Denver Broncos to be a playoff team and for that defense to take the turnaround as much as they had, right? Because that defense was a weak spot for that team a year ago. Vance Joseph really turned that unit around. This team led the NFL in sacks this year. And I think this is going to be a difficult game for the Bills. And yeah, it's a bit nerve-wracking today because you see sort of what happened around the games yesterday, like teams feeling each other out, but the Baltimore Ravens end up having really no doubt win against the Steelers. That game never really felt too much in doubt. And then the Texans storming back against the Chargers, just obliterating them in the second half. So playoff football is weird, one and done. It is very stress-inducing. I was talking on the Spaces yesterday with Aaron, and we were talking about how winning a Super Bowl is probably the most satisfying championship to win if you're a fan of a sports team of all the major sports, just because of the one and done scenario and how difficult it is. And the road to winning the Super Bowl and the teams you have to play are going to be so difficult. But it starts today. You got to win this first one.
Yeah, even more stress-inducing. The last time the Buffalo Bills lost at home was to the Denver Broncos in Week 10 of last season on that Monday Night Football ugly last-second field goal where we had too many men on the field. But another stat that is a little cringeworthy, and one thing that we're going to talk about a little bit as the show progresses, specifically when we get to the Buffalo Bills defense versus the Denver Broncos offense. The one thing I think as Bills fans that we're going to be the most stressed about is going to be this defense. In Josh Allen's 5 career playoff losses, The opposing quarterbacks have led their teams to an average of 31.5 points per game, while accounting for 13 touchdowns and no interceptions with 120.7 quarterback rating. The Buffalo Bills defense needs to show up today, and they need to show up in a big way.
They do, and look, this team's healthy. There's going to be no excuse, to be honest, today. Talked a little bit too about how the Bills have counted a lot on turnovers this year, and they're the number one turnover differential team in the league. But the Denver Broncos haven't turned the ball over a ton themselves. They're +6 as well in turnover differential. They're a top 10 team there. So neither of these teams really turned the ball over a ton. The Bills have done a better job at taking the ball away, but again, this is going to be a game where like it could literally be one turnover maybe that makes the difference. So this defense needs to show up, and you know, I'll get to that when we get to our superlatives in the Take Me Higher, but like it's put up or shut up time for me for this defensive line when it comes to the playoffs. That's kind of my stance right now.
And the Broncos pretty good at it as well. They haven't lost the turnover battle. It's since week 9. So this is a team that does not turn the ball over either, and a team that forces turnovers as well. All right, let's take a look now at some of the things that could contribute to the way this game is played, and that is injuries and weather. And really, neither should play much of a factor in this game. The weather today at Highmark Stadium, or as my shirt says, Rich Stadium. Can't really see it with the microphone there. Mid-30s, little wind, partly cloudy, no precipitation. So again, weather should not be a factor. When you're looking at the injuries, the Broncos really not dealing with much. Frank Crum, a reserve offensive lineman, was put on the NFI list. He is out. Questionable is depth running back Tyler Beatty, who is just coming off IR, so he's not even really technically a roster spot yet. He's still in that 3-week window. And then for the Buffalo Bills, only one player with a designation, and that is Brandon Codrington, the very, very talented return man. Practice squad elevations for the Bills, Kareem Jackson and Jalen Virgil, both former Broncos. Both players at positions where the Bills are a little thin because injuries have sort of chipped away at those positions over the course of the year. But the Bills technically, based on the designations, are healthy at both positions. So this could be just for paycheck purposes. But if Codrington is out, they also have an extra roster spot to throw around. Jalen Virgil has only returned kicks in his career, both pro and college, never punts. But this Brandon Codrington injury could really sting if he can't go, or he can simply only catch punts today for the Buffalo Bills, because no one else on this roster has done it this season.
Yeah, and the Bills special teams have struggled this year. Denver Broncos, I think they're the number one special teams DVOA unit in the NFL. They have an all-pro returner themselves in Marvin Mims. So not being able to match that as best as you can if you're the Bills with Brandon Codrington, fielding punts, we know in Highmark is always a little bit tricky. That's a tough one if you're the Bills, because that's certainly an advantage the Denver Broncos have already, but then you kind of give them a little bit more of an advantage in the return game. I would want to see Khalil Shakir back there. I don't think it would be Virgil. I think Virgil would just be maybe to take some reps maybe away from Shakir in certain situations where the Bills are maybe window dressing or running the ball to where they don't want to necessarily burn Shakir out. But I do think, as Pop says, who is the punt return today? I would guess it would be Khalil Shakir.
Yeah, my guess is Khalil Shakir as well, or Brandon Codrington plays, but he literally just goes out there to field punts. He just fair catches everything. So that could be another situation you see for the Buffalo Bills today.
We've talked about this before. There is the option to just literally let every punt go and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, like you guarantee yourself possession if you do that.
And that just stinks for the Buffalo Bills, right? Because you mentioned like they're the number one team in special teams DVOA. Whereas the Buffalo Bills seemingly always struggled under Sean McDermott, at least the last 2-3 years, it has been special teams. So when you talk about bad teams, or not, I shouldn't say bad. That's a
excuse me. Broncos are the number 4 team in DVOA.
Yeah. And I shouldn't say bad team. They're a playoff team, right? Like, so when underdog teams, which is what the Denver Broncos are, when they come into opposing team stadiums and they beat them in the playoffs, it's usually because of things like we just mentioned at the top of the show, and we'll talk about again, turnovers, which the Buffalo Bills, literally the best team in NFL history at protecting the football this year. No one has ever protected the football like the Buffalo Bills in recorded NFL history. The Buffalo Bills only 8 turnovers this season. So I feel pretty confident there, right? But here is where you start to look for things that could chip away at the Buffalo Bills' chances to win this game. And special teams is one of them. Will Lutz versus Tyler Bass, right? Marvin Mims, all-pro kick returner, versus the Buffalo Bills, who is returning kicks and punts for the Buffalo Bills. Those type of things are what chips away at the team that is favored to win the game.
Yeah, it's like if you're, if you're like a huge favorite and like your star player's out, like you're still going to be picked to win. I'm not saying Condrick's the star player, but it's certainly an area of the game that, I mean, we've seen the Bills struggle on kick coverage at times this year as well, like against the Patriots. They struggled against the San Francisco 49ers, and Deebo Samuel had some nice returns against them in the snow. You go back to the Arizona Cardinals game in week 1, they give up a return touchdown in that game. So it's one of those things that makes you nervous, especially with Marvin Mims back there returning for the Broncos. I would, if I'm the Buffalo Bills, I'm Tyler Bass and I'm Sean McDermott and I'm getting in the ear of Matthew Smiley today, I'm going to say, like, to the extent you can, barring wind, try to kick it through the end zone on every single kickoff.
All right, let's get into some of the matchups today. Let's start with the Buffalo Bills offense versus the Denver Broncos defense. Dave, what does the DVOA tell us about this Broncos defense?
It's very good. 4th overall in defense, 1st in rushing defense in DVOA, 5th in passing DVOA defense in passing. This is where really one of the 4 things we review, defensive DVOA, passing, rushing, offensive DVOA, passing, rushing. Of the 4 areas we review, this is really the only area where we have a bit of divergence from the raw statistics. They're 19th in passing defense based on the raw statistics, but 5th in DVOA. Yeah. So this is one of those where this passing defense is certainly better than advertised based on the raw statistics. They're 1st in DVOA against tight ends, although they're 31st against running backs out of the backfield. They've played 7 games against top 11 DVOA passing offenses. Baltimore, who's 1st, Cincinnati, who's 4th, Tampa Bay, who's 5th, the Chargers twice, and Kansas City twice. All those teams are top 11 DVOA passing offenses that this pass defense has gone against. Outside of the one game against Vegas, which was an anomaly, Cincinnati, and the Cleveland game, which I think was a bit of an anomaly as well, the Broncos have only allowed an average of 185 passing yards per game. They're the 6th lowest yards per attempt allowed team in the NFL at 6.8. And they lead the NFL in sacks by 9, is the next closest team. So on the passing side, very good, better than advertised if you're just looking at the volume stats. On the rushing side, they're 3rd against the run in raw stats versus 1st in DVOA. So certainly we have alignment here. They're only one of 2 teams allowing under 4 yards per carry. Baltimore is the only other team doing that. They've played Baltimore, who's the 1st rushing offense, Atlanta 5th, Tampa Bay 8th, Indy 10th as far as DVOA rushing offenses, Kansas City's 12th, and New Orleans 14th. And they have the 6th most tackles for loss in the NFL. So very stout defense, good against the run, good against the pass. The one thing to highlight here is that the DVOA is certainly telling you that this is a better passing defense when considering the opponents they've played and things of that nature than the raw statistics would tell you.
Yeah, I mean, this Denver defense has allowed the fewest yards per game and posted the most sacks per game against playoff teams, and the unit ranks 2nd in scoring defense against the same postseason group. So this is a defense that it doesn't just clean up against inferior opponents. This is a defense that steps up and plays really, really well against playoff caliber football teams, as evidenced by that data and the data that you shared as well. And just a lot of really talented players. Obviously, Patrick Surtain able to lock down one entire side of the football field. You have Zach Allen, who absolutely dominates the line of scrimmage. And I think that he is just a really, really good football player. And then you got a guy like Nick Bonito, who's really starting to emerge with 13.5 sacks this year. Obviously, the Broncos lead the National Football League in sacks. The Buffalo Bills offensive line is going to need to continue to step up the way they have continued to step up all season.
They really do. And we'll get to this super chat from Brendan in a second. I said this on X yesterday. Like, I don't know how hot of a take it is. I think maybe it's a lukewarm take. I think at the time that Nick Bonito signs his next contract, he will be the highest paid defensive player in the NFL at the time that he signs it. Now, he's not going to be probably for long because this thing's sort of like evolved, but I think he is going to be the top paid defensive player in the NFL when it comes time to get that next contract. I mean, he has been an absolute stud. We liked him in the pre-draft process as a pass rusher, and that's translated now into the pros. But that defensive line is a wagon. Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, a sneaky good trade they made with the Jets before the season. Like, no one's really talking about that. And of course, Jonathan Cooper as well off the edge. So they've got a lot of guys that can get to the passer. Although the Bills, right, as we've said, Josh Allen in this Bills offensive line has allowed the fewest sacks in the NFL. So there's strength on strength.
Versus strength. Yep. Brendan B comes in and says, "Welcome back, Judge. Thank you. Appreciate the kind words." He says, "Here's hoping this game is as non-competitive as the others have been so far in the playoffs." Yes, let's hope. But this Denver Broncos defense provides quite a challenge. And one of the statistics that might point to this being possibly a closer game, Josh Allen has a career 71 passer rating when facing defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. That ranks 27th among the 28 quarterbacks who have made at least 2 starts versus a Vance Joseph-led defense. Among quarterbacks with 10 career playoff starts, Allen ranks first in postseason history in yards per game, touchdowns per game, and touchdown to interception ratio. So the Buffalo Bills are going to need all that really good stuff that Josh Allen brings in the playoffs and not so much the struggles he has had versus these Vance Joseph-led defenses.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another one of those situations where if the Bills can get up early, it's really going to help things out in this game. If the Bills find themselves in a dogfight early and it's a bit back and forth, or they even go down in this game, I could see this being a fight to the end. I mean, Denver, third best points per game allowed as well. Third lowest points per game allowed as well, I should say, on defense as well. No bones about it says Bills are going to send a message today. And I do feel like there is a growing, and I can't remember who said it in the comments. I think it might have been RJ earlier, about how it seems like throughout this week, like that media and experts and pundits have been kind of slowly turning against the Bills in this game. And it's kind of culminated obviously with the All-Pro, the All-Pro list coming out. And it just feels like there's a lot of distrust right now in the Bills going into this game. So maybe they come in with a chip on their shoulder and the offense comes out firing. But I do think it's important for this offense to get out to a good start in this game to kind of get that lead and force the Broncos to play from behind.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the Buffalo Bills defense being opportunistic this year with turnovers. Denver's defense has been opportunistic as well. This is a unit that finished the regular season tied for 7th in takeaways. The Broncos are 9-3 this season when forcing just one singular turnover. Denver hasn't lost the turnover battle, as we mentioned at the top of the show, since week 9 and their loss to the Ravens. The Broncos are 7-2 and they hold an edge in the takeaway margin. Also, as I mentioned earlier, they lead the league in sacks. The Bills, on the other hand, have turned the ball over just 8 times this season, which is tied for the fewest in a season since the league began tracking the stat in 1933. As a team, Buffalo is plus 24 turnover margin, the best mark since the 2012 New England Patriots. The Bills allowed just 14 sacks this season, and they're the only team in the Super Bowl era to allow fewer than 1 sack and 1 giveaway per game. Again, strength on strength. Those trends for the Buffalo Bills, hopefully not the Denver Broncos, need to continue today.
Yeah, and I mean, as we start to kind of think about what this means for the Bills, like schematically and game plan wise, like to me, this has got to be a focus on the quick passing game. I think that you really got to use James Cook and Ty Johnson out of the backfield here. I mean, we mentioned Denver Broncos 31st in DVOA against running backs as pass catchers. They are first against tight ends, so that gives me a little pause, but I do think Khalil Shakir working in the slot today is an advantage for the Bills. Obviously, Surtain's going to be on one side, and that CB2 for Denver, whether it's Riley Moss, who's probably going to draw the start. Pat Surtain, take the grades for what you worth, number 1 PFF corner in the league this year. I think that most people would say, yes, take the grades with a grain of salt, but that makes sense. They don't have another guy that's ranked above 70 on the other side, who the rotating door of CB2. So to me, I think this is about James Cook out of the backfield, Ty Johnson out of the backfield, and working Khalil Shakir out of the slot. in the quick passing game, neutralize some of that Denver pass rush today by getting rid of the ball quickly. And honestly, Josh Allen's legs too become an X factor with this as the Denver Broncos rush upfield. Josh Allen being able to escape not just to his right where he's great, but up the middle through the pocket and up into the middle of the field where Denver's linebackers are probably the weakness of this defense. To me, those are the three areas where if I'm the Bills, the offensive game planning has got to be, I think, a lot of focus on running backs, utilization of running backs out of the backfield, Khalil Shakir working the middle, and then Josh Allen's legs, to me, are going to be the three keys for this Bills offense today.
Yeah, the Denver Broncos are last in DVOA against running backs out of the backfield. They're second last. I might be like one 31st. Or two off here. But expected game plan similar to that of the Lions game, in my opinion. A lot of James Cook, a decent amount of Ty Johnson, a little Ray Davis sprinkled in here or there, and Kincaid and Shakir, as you mentioned, the linebackers of the Denver Broncos probably being, at least on paper, their biggest weakness, are probably going to be the go-to receivers that are non-running backs in this football game. I'm just looking at the Detroit Lions game for reference. Like, how were the targets distributed? Who stepped up? Who didn't? You had a big game from Ty Johnson, 5 for 114, right? I think the running backs out of the backfield, 128, is going to be a huge part of this football game. You had the tight end stepping up in that Detroit game. Dalton Kincaid went 4 for 53. Dawson Knox went 2 for 42. And Khalil Shakir stepped up in that game. Only 39 yards, but he had 6 catches and a touchdown in that game. And then you kind of just saw the wide receiver sprinkled in a little bit. Keon Coleman with that big play down the field, 1 for 64. And that was it outside of Khalil Shakir. So Josh Allen, like Matt Collins said, like 1 catch for 7 yards or something like that. So really that game plan for the Buffalo Bills against the Detroit Lions was get the ball to your tight ends, get the ball to your running backs, get the ball to Khalil Shakir. I think you're going to see a lot of that again against the Denver Broncos today. A game plan very, very similar to that Detroit Lions game plan.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the Bills obviously were facing a somewhat depleted Detroit Lions defensive line that day, but again, you have to find a way to neutralize this pass rush from the Denver Broncos. And yes, it is strength against strength, but I don't think you even want to make that a possibility in this game because again, 1 turnover for the Denver Broncos, they're 7-2, like you said, right? And it's like, don't give the Denver Broncos one of those types of plays, one of those toxic types of plays that can really squeeze this game, right? If anything, throwaways, taking what the defense gives you, quick passing game, just don't make it easier on them or don't give them a cheap one. I think that is so important in this game against a defense like this is like, yeah, you may have to drive down the field 7, 10, 12 plays, but certainly do not give the Denver Broncos a short field by giving the ball away yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the real wild cards to me are Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper. Like, I expect Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, James Cook, I expect them to get theirs in this football game. I expect Ty Johnson and Dawson Knox to step up in auxiliary roles. I expect Knox to make a play or two. I expect Ty Johnson to make a play or two. Those are what I expect. So where does the wild card performance comes in? Like, who steps up? Who else steps up in this wide receiver room and makes a big play? Is it Matt Collins? Is it Keon Coleman? Is it Amari Cooper? Is it Ray Davis? Like, who is that other guy who kind of steps up in this football game? Who do you think it's going to be?
Well, I would say it's going to depend on where Patrick Surtain's lining up on any given play, right? He does move around a bit, but I think if the Bills are lining up and they're kind of seeing, okay, like we've got, Keon Coleman now matched up with Riley Moss, or we've got Amari Cooper now matched up with Riley Moss and maybe the other receivers on the other side. I think it's going to be at spots you take those chances against whoever it is that's not lined up against Patrick Surtain. So I don't know that you can predict that it's one or the other because I think it's going to be a mixture of these guys, but I think it could be like 1 or 2 plays from Cooper or 1 or 2 plays from Coleman. I don't think it's necessarily going to sit with one guy particularly, but I think Josh Allen is going to have to take a few chances against the opposite side of where Pat Surtain's lining up, whether it's Moss on, Riley Moss on Amari Cooper or Riley Moss on Keon Coleman. That's an area where Riley Moss has struggled a bit with some injuries of late, kind of getting back to 100%. And we saw the Cincinnati Bengals take advantage of that in that game, obviously a couple weeks ago. Like, it won't be high volume, but there could be some big plays down the field potentially for Coleman and Cooper.
Yeah, here's to hoping maybe Keon Coleman has himself a Gabriel Davis in the postseason type of game,
Yeah.
right? That way, I think fans would go nuts if he put up some Gabriel Davis in the postseason type stat lines. But Carl Thoman comes in and says that the Bills win the coin toss. Do they receive or defer? This is a very tricky question. I think if you look
I'm
at it,
kicking. I'm kicking.
I'm kicking as well, but I think you do have the fear that Denver Broncos march right down the field on your defense and score. That's, I think, a legitimate fear that you have, but I agree. I would kick as well.
I'm
Team,
trusting my defense to
team
start the
double
game
dip
at
all the way.
home.
Yeah.
Team double dip. I'm trusting my defense at home with the crowd behind them to hopefully force a quick 3 and out and then certainly swing the tide of that coin toss. You want to have a chance to double dip. Conversely, if the Bills do lose the toss and they do go out on offense right away, again, the quick start is important. Even if they end up with only 3 points on that first drive, or even if they drive, towards midfield and at least flip the field position, it cannot be a slow start on that first drive.
And thank you, Carl, for that super chat as well. Always appreciate what you bring to the comment section, and thank you for that. Now let's talk matchups: the Buffalo Bills defense versus the Denver Broncos offense, led by rookie quarterback Bo Nix, and obviously the play calling of Sean Payton. Dave, what does the DVOA tell us about this Broncos offense?
Yeah, Broncos offense, 16th overall in DVOA offense. Now, keep in mind, this does also include Week 18, so a slight caveat, but because they played that game against the Chiefs, but they were 18th overall before Week 18. So a little bit of movement, nothing too crazy to kind of asterisk there. 15th in the passing DVOA offense, 24th in rushing DVOA offense. In passing, we have some alignment here, 20th in raw stats versus 15th in DVOA. They have 9 games of 216 passing yards or fewer. They have some poor passing totals against some of the lower pass defenses in the league. Baltimore under 200 passing. They had under 200 passing yards against Baltimore, even playing from behind in that game. Only 121 passing yards against Indy and only 206 against Cincinnati. They played 7 of the bottom 12 DVOA pass defenses: Tampa Bay, Carolina, Atlanta, Cleveland, Indy, Cincinnati, New York Jets. So while Bo Nix has certainly heated up the second half of the season and his numbers look really good, like there is some reasoning for that sort of underneath. And like even in some of these recent games, they necessarily haven't been super sharp in the passing game. It's been a lot of Bo Nix with his legs creating some things. So again, the Bills pass defense against this Denver passing offense, this is an area where you need to kind of lock it down. Cortland Sutton, biggest threat there, obviously, and Marvin Mims. We'll talk about that in a second. Rushing side, they've played 4 of the bottom 9 DVOA rushing defenses. Carolina is dead last. New Orleans, Atlanta, Cincinnati. If you take away their 225-yard rushing effort against the Saints, which was a bit of an anomaly, and the Kansas City game in Week 18, where Kansas City was playing their backups, the Broncos are only averaging 101 rushing yards per game, and they have the 10th fewest rushing TDs in the NFL. So again, the offense, well, as good as this defense is, the offense is like a big play offense. Bo Nix has he has the 30th. He's ranked 30th in yards per attempt, 6.7. But he also has the 3rd most dropped air yards per data.fantasypoints.com. So he does try to take those shots down the field. But in overall, this team is very, I would say, average offensively, both passing and rushing. But any given game, obviously, they can tell you they're a bit of a roller coaster offense from what I've seen this year.
Yeah, some great comments from the comment section. Brendan P comes in and says, got to make Bo Nix make mistakes. This is a game where McDermott and Babbage need to step up. Just the tip of Canusa is coming in saying, I've been saying all week, but I think we're going to come away happy with the duo of Bernard and Milano, screen game chasers. That's obviously a staple of Sean Payton's playbook. And Charles G coming in saying, it's a huge game for Babbage, rookie quarterback. I expect a ton of disguised coverages, simulated pressures, and bringing different combos of 4-5-man rushes. There's a couple of things that really scare me, and I'm not going to lie to you. I really, really hope I'm wrong, but I'm not feeling very comfortable and confident with this Buffalo Bills defense heading into this matchup with the Denver Broncos. I think a lot of the things that the Broncos do well on offense, even though they're kind of Jekyll and Hyde a little bit, are kind of some of the weaknesses of this Buffalo Bills defense. One thing here is, according to NFL Next Gen Stats, Bo Nix ranks 1st in passing yards and 3rd in passing touchdowns when throwing on the move. Buffalo's defense has allowed 10 passing touchdowns to quarterbacks on the run, which is tied for most in the NFL this season. Nix has this dual threat ability, and it could test the Buffalo Bills' athleticism. The safeties, right, of the Bills, that's kind of concerning. If Bo Nix gets out of the pocket, he's throwing on the run. Do those safeties have the range to keep up with the Marvin Mimses of the world, the Cortland Sutlans of the world down the football field? I don't want to overreact too much to a play in a meaningless game, but you saw that Joe Milton touchdown last week where Taylor Rapp just looked completely confounded as the deep safety. Those kind of things, those kind of plays made out of structure that Bo Nix is capable of deep down the field, the Buffalo Bills need to make sure that they have the ability to defend those things.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Bo Nix is not afraid to take those shots, right? We've just talked about that with he has the most dropped air yards of any quarterback in the NFL. Even though his yards per attempt is low, it kind of evens out with the fact that he's had some drops. Now, getting Bo Nix outside of the pocket is something that Sean Payton, I think, is going to do a lot today, not just on off-script plays, but by design, because as it's been talked about throughout this week, Bo Nix tied with Geno Smith for the most batted passes down in the league with 16. So what's one way you can combat that if you're Sean Payton and Bo Nix? Get him outside of the pocket to where those batted passes aren't really possible or very less likely. And he's been really good at that and kind of taking what the defense has been giving him. Now, I will say, and this was a stat Uber put up, which was interesting. In the final 3 games of the year, 46.8% of Bo Nix's completed passes were at or behind the line of scrimmage. So you've got to be aware of that screen game if you're the Bills defense. It's an area where the Broncos have really performed well. And Bo Nix getting the ball out of his hands quickly. He's only been sacked 24 times this year. And the Denver Broncos have allowed the 5th fewest sack yards in the NFL, the Bills the fewest. So again, a team that doesn't allow a ton of sacks either. Those off-script plays with Bo Nix on the run, or even the design plays with Bo Nix outside the pocket, are going to stress this Bills defense. They have to be ready for that.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to diminish what Bo Nix has done this year. Like I'm not going to hate on Bo Nix. I was not very high on Bo Nix. I thought he was a day 2 quarterback because I do think like he is capable of going out in the National Football League and being a starting quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to be some like top 10 quarterback. I don't think his rookie season is like sign of like things to come. I think you're really seeing the ceiling of Bo Nix the season as a rookie. And part of that is the environment that you are drafted into. And I think the environment that Bo Nix was drafted into was the perfect environment for Bo Nix. Sean Payton and Bo Nix, what Bo Nix does well, Sean Payton really has an innate ability to highlight those things. And maybe his ceiling gets a little slightly higher as they maybe add some more talent with all that dead cap that's coming off the books. But really, I think it was just a perfect situation for Bo Nix to be drafted into there. And Carl Thoman comes in and says the 2 most important people on the Bills defense are Von Miller and Gregory Rousseau, as they need to get consistent pressure on Nix while containing him in the pocket. Brendan P says, I need Oliver to step up today as well. Interior pressure will be key to getting him off of his timing. You mentioned they are pretty good at protecting their quarterback in Denver. The Buffalo Bills pressured opposing quarterbacks at the 12th highest rate this season, while Denver has allowed the 2nd lowest pressure rate in the NFL. When Nix was not pressured this season, he completed more than 70% of his passes while throwing 24 touchdowns and posting a 104.2 passer rating. So there is a lot of pressure on this Buffalo Bills defensive line today. Ed Oliver, Gregory Rousseau, they have flashed in the regular season a ton over the course of their careers. They need, for the first time in their lives, to have a big-time playoff performance. And the Von Miller versus his old team needs to play like the Von Miller of old for the Buffalo Bills to get a win in this football game here today.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to see is the pass rush getting too far upfield, which I think is something that we need to look out for in this game. I don't think the Broncos are going to have any problems letting Von Miller or Gregory Rousseau get deep upfield or in the backfield as Bo Nix can step up and run out of trouble. One of the better quarterbacks at sort of doing that as well. And like we see Josh Allen do it all the time. Bo Nix obviously not on Josh Allen's level, but he's capable of making those plays with his legs as well. So it's one of those things where I think if the Bills do kind of like what they've done against some of these teams in recent weeks where they've kind of had that integrity and sort of not pushing too far up the field, That's going to be important. And for a guy like Von Miller, who really likes to take that wide rush, really important for him to kind of angle back towards the pocket and not get too far upfield today.
And that's just who the Bills are. That's how they're constructed. They want their defensive ends to get up the field like that. That's part of the way their defense is sort of modeled and created and constructed. It's part of their game plan, part of their DNA. But one would hope that over the course of this season, seeing how that has been exploited by other teams and knowing how good the Broncos are at it, that the Buffalo Bills will have some adjustments for that today. And again, like I said, I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I'm just not very high on this defense right now. I think this was a rebuild year for the Buffalo Bills. They have sort of overcome a lot of the preseason expectations for this team. A lot of that has to do with Josh Allen and the offense, in my opinion. And I'm not trying to discredit the defense too much, because I think they've had a good season and they've really made sure to force a lot of turnovers. But this is a defense historically in the playoffs under Sean McDermott that has allowed an average of 33 points and more than 400 yards in the 5 matchups against their playoff opponents this season. And the unit is also has 55.6% third down conversion rate and a 90% red zone conversion rate. Buffalo went 2-3 in those games against playoff teams this past season. And the team's scoring, red zone, and third down numbers against playoff teams ranked dead last in the National Football League. This is a defense that when they played a competent playoff caliber football team, absolutely folded.
Yeah, and I mean, this has been kind of the theme of the defense in the playoffs as well, right, for this team. And I would say largely the reason they've lost most of the play times they've gone out in the playoffs, they've bowed out in the playoffs, has become because the defense has really let them down. And rare occasion where Josh Allen has let them down. I think the only game you can say where it was a total team collapse maybe was that Cincinnati playoff game a couple of years ago. But otherwise, Josh Allen has showed up in the playoffs, has showed up in playoff games, and the defense really has been what's let this team down. Now, I have some cautious optimism because the defense is maybe as healthy as it's been going into a playoff game, but I still don't necessarily know that Terrell Bernard's 100%. I don't think he is, but I'd still take an 80% Terrell Bernard over really what the alternative is. And so I agree with, I think it might have been Brendan P. who said, I need Oliver to show up today. And, you know, as we kind of segue into the superlatives, I'll just leave it at that as we kind of tease a little bit what is to come here in a few minutes.
Yeah. Up next now, our pregame superlatives. As we kick off our pregame superlative here on the Air Raid Hour pregame show, we, as always, start with our Take Me Higher player of the game. All right. As always, we start with our Take Me Higher player of the game. This is a player not named Josh Allen. So if anyone new to the Air Raid Hour here is like, it's going to be Josh Allen. Aren't you saying Josh Allen? Can't say Josh Allen. That's a given, right? Who is one player not named Josh Allen, a star player on the Buffalo Bills not named Josh Allen, that needs to step up big time to take the Buffalo Bills higher in this matchup against the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, and I know we've both used, but I know you have used James Cook a lot this year for Take Me Higher, but I'm going Ed Oliver today for the same reasons Brendan showed, for the same reasons historically why the Bills have struggled sometimes in some of these games. Ed Oliver needs to set the tone up front for this defensive line. The Broncos, very good offensive line, number 1 pass blocking unit per PFF, a top 10 run blocking unit per PFF. Again, take the grades with a grain of salt, but this is a good pass blocking team, as evidenced by fifth fewest sack yards allowed. Bo Nix only sacked 24 times this year. They're going to be really after it in the screen game. Quinn Miners is a pre-draft favorite of ours, and all pro this year. Ed Oliver has got to bring it today. And I'm sorry, but like hearing the speeches in the locker room and stuff about like, oh, you know, I'm ready for the whatever. Like, that's fine. You can say that. And I'm glad you're saying that, but you got to now show it on the field come playoff time, right? People are like, oh, Ed Oliver, big game incoming. It's like, okay, like just because he said that, like I need to see it on the field. And if I see it on the field, I'll be the happiest guy in the world, but I need to see it on the field today. It's got to be Ed Oliver setting the tone for that defense to kind of shut down this Broncos offense today.
Yeah, comes in and says Amari Cooper. Someone else comes in and says Brandon P comes in and says wide receiver. Core need to take me higher. I think at this point, those guys would be mostly wild cards outside of Carl Thoman's choice here, where he says Khalil Shakir is going to have to yak it up. Charles G comes in with a good one. He says Bills offensive line, all of them. And I'm going to continue to go with what I've been going with all year. And RJ Melville is in agreement with me here. He says James Cook is my take me higher player. He is my take me higher player of the game as well. I think you're going to need a 150 all-purpose yard, 2-touchdown type of performance from him today. He is the X factor skill position player on this football team. Denver is second to last in the NFL in DVOA to running backs out of the backfield in 2024. Go and exploit that if you are the Buffalo Bills. James Cook needs to be a key cog in what the Buffalo Bills do today offensively. All right, next up is our, if I can get my act together here as the co-host / producer, our wild card player of the game. Like Scott, just someone take me higher. Scott doesn't care. Just someone do it. I really like that. I'm sorry, that came in after we switched segments. That was a really good one. Our wild card player of the game. This is sort of like a non-star player, a role player, a depth player, a lesser named starting player that steps up for the Buffalo Bills in order for them to achieve success in this football game. Dave, who is your wild card player of the game?
Yeah, look, I think you could go offense with Dawson Knox. I think is a good one, but I'm gonna go with a guy I've used a few times this year on the wild card. But again, Denver Broncos. I'm going back to the defense. Denver Broncos been really good at protecting Bo Nix, but 16 batted passes this year. One of the better players on the Bills at batting down passes, AJ Epinesa, I think, behind Rousseau, behind Von Miller. The defensive line, again, the theme for me continues that has to show up, and a wild card player for me today will be AJ Epinesa. I think if he can maybe bat a ball up in the air, the Bills get a turnover off of that, maybe an interception, that could be key, especially in a game where it might be tough for the Bills to get home against Bo Nix and actually bring him to the ground. Get in those passing lanes, keep him inside the pocket, force him to throw over those lengthy ends the Bills have in Rousseau and Epinesa. Give me AJ Epinesa as a wild card player today.
Nice. We got a couple people coming in, no bones about it. Says Taylor Rapp. Roy Collins says wild card is DeMar Hamlin, gets a timely pick. Claude Puy comes in, says Keon Coleman. Charles G says Benford is going to make a huge play today. And then we have Brendan P coming in saying Ty Johnson, and Justin Tippecanoe saying
Ty Johnson for me is elevated out of the wild card category. He's like in a no man's land category for me now. But yeah, I love that pick.
Justin Tippecanoe comes in and says Ty Johnson, he'll be out there a lot in pass pro, 4 catches. Well, apparently my pick has been invalidated here because my wild card player of the game is Ty Johnson.
It's a great pick.
I just think the Buffalo Bills are going to be in a lot of passing situations, right? Like the Broncos have shown through DVOA that they are a very, very good team in stopping the runs. The Buffalo Bills are probably going to pass a little bit more than usual. They are second to last in the NFL in DVOA to running backs out of the backfield. So I think you're going to see another game plan very similar to that of the Detroit Lions game, where who stepped up? Ty Johnson, and had his huge wild card player of the game. That was the week he picked Ty Johnson to be the wild card player of the game, and he had 5 catches for 104. So
right on that one.
He's going to be used as a pass protector. That's important with a team that leads the NFL in sacks. He'll be in there in down and distance situations. He'll be in there in passing situations. So I think Ty Johnson's going to get enough run today, get enough targets today to elevate himself to being the wild card player of this game. All right, next up is our Respect You player of the game. All right, Dave, who is an opposing player on the Denver Broncos that the Buffalo Bills need to respect in order to win this football game?
Yeah, for me, it's Nick Bonito, all-pro edge rusher, leading their team in sacks at 13.5. Obviously had the crazy pick 6 as well against the Indianapolis Colts a few weeks ago, if you remember that play. This guy can single-handedly change the game in favor of the Denver Broncos if allowed to, and the Bills are going to have their hands full in protecting Josh Allen with Nick Bonito lining up on the one edge. And again, they have guys everywhere: Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, Jonathan Cooper, whatever. Nick Bonito is the lead dog of that group, who can be a game wrecker for the Denver Broncos. And the strength of the Denver Broncos obviously has been that defensive line, on that defense leading the NFL in sacks. So for me, You have to respect Nick Bonito. I would love to come out of this game with not hearing his name called a bunch of times.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with, to me, the big three on their defense is the three guys that had all-pro votes. One of them on the first team, Patrick Surtain, the other two on the second team, and Nick Bonito and Zach Allen. All three of those guys are going to impose their will. Brendan P comes in and says, Broncos O-line, they need to be respected and then disrespected. I like that one. Roy Collins comes in and says Patrick Surtain. Charles G says Zach Allen scares me versus our interior offensive line. Carl Thoman says the Bills will try and shut down Cortland Sutton. And then Klopwe says Patrick Surtain, got to stay away from him. And yeah, I mean, he pretty much takes away one side of the football field, whichever side he is on. So the Buffalo Bills need to attack that other corner. They need to attack the middle of the field. They need to run the football well today in order to have success because Patrick Surtain is just that good. I also have a lot of respect just a shout out for some of the non-star, like star defenders on this Denver Broncos team. DJ Jones, such a beast against the run. You mentioned John Franklin Myers a couple of times. What a trade that was for them. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Cooper, like they are just really, really stout up front. So credit where credit is due to the Denver Broncos there. And then up next is our hottest takes from today's game. All right, Dave, we are having a fire sale here at the Air Raid Hour. What is your hottest take about what is going to occur in this football game here today?
My hot take is that the Bills will be trailing with less than 2 minutes to go, but Josh Allen will lead a game-winning touchdown drive and throw a game-winning touchdown pass to your wild card player, Ty Johnson. So
I will literally shit my pants if we are in that type of situation. I might not survive it.
That's my hot take.
You'll be doing the post-game show solo because I will have deceased. My hottest take is I think Josh Allen goes for over 75 yards rushing because I think you're going to see a lot of man-to-man defense from the Broncos. Backs turn. Josh Allen takes advantage of that. But that's not the hottest take in the world. So I'm going to combine Josh Allen rushing over 75 yards with the Bills running backs, Cook, Davis, Johnson, combining for 200 all-purpose yards.
I like that. I think if that happens and the Bills lose, like I don't even know what to say. I mean, I agree with what you said about James Cook, right? About like if he needs to show up because I think if the Broncos contain James Cook, especially in the passing game, it's gonna be a struggle for the Bills offense to move the ball down the field. So I like that.
Armando Ortega comes in and says Broncos going to be the surprise of the week. I hope not. Just Tippecanoe comes in and says Christian Benford gets a sack on the opening drive. Brendan P says Bills will get 4 sacks in total. Ice Buddy comes in and says 17, gets 3 touchdowns to 3 different receivers. Dan Van Kay comes in and says the Bills score 35. Sweet Spike comes in and says Bills go up 3 scores in the first half, then rest Cook in the second unless Davis and Johnson pound it. That would be a much better scenario for me than your hot take, Dave. Yaya comes in and says 2 sacks, 2 turnovers. Carl Thoman says Tyler Bass will be perfect on all PATs. No field goals will be attempted as we get into the end zone frequently. Alec Anderson touchdown, says Sophia. Like Charles G says Coleman Tutty. Ralph C. Wilson Sr. says, who's the backup QB for the Broncos? I expect to see him today. Hopefully because Bo Nix is benched.
Isn't it Zach Wilson? Isn't he the backup?
Zach Wilson or Jarrett Stidham? I'm not sure which one is active and which one is inactive. We got Scott Blakely coming in saying Josh Allen combines for 5 touchdowns in our 40.
Put that in the universe, please.
Yeah, please. All right, now it's time to head back to the future with our pregame prediction. All right, Dave, paint a picture for us. Take us back to the future here. What's the final score of this football game?
Yeah, I think, look, I already kind of somewhat gave it away with my hot take that the Bills will have to come from behind and win this game. I think it's going to be a bit of a back and forth game. I think there'll be some defensive plays made by both teams today, and I think it'll be a dogfight today with the Denver Broncos, and the Bills will really have to do anything they can to survive this game. I do think James Cook has a big day. I'm not sure if it's 150. That's why it's a hot take from you, but I do I do expect Khalil Shakir to have some success. I do expect James Cook to have some success. Josh Allen with his legs, like you said. But I also think Bo Nix is going to have some success with his legs. And I think the Broncos screen game and possibly a big play from Marvin Mims, either in the return game or in the passing game, are going to keep the Denver Broncos in this game. The Bills will need a touchdown, not a field goal, to win at the end, and they will have to come back. I say they'll be down by 4 coming down in the final 2 minutes, and they'll end up scoring that touchdown to Ty Johnson at the end to take the 3-point lead and the 3-point win. So for me, it's Bills 27, Broncos 24.
That happens. Kudos to the NFL script writers for putting that one into the universe. But Brendan Pete comes in and says 30-19 Bills. Charles G 27-21 Bills. Yaya comes in and says 31-17 Bills. Scott Blakely 38-16 Bills. Sophia G comes in and says 40 burger to 17 Bills. Ralph Wilson Sr. 38-24 Bills. Claude Puy 38-21 Bills. Carl Feldman says Bills roll 35-14. So my prediction, I think this one's going to be a nail biter as well. Prove me wrong, defense. Prove me wrong. I do not think that they are going to play well in this game. I think Sean Payton will have some things cooked up that will allow the Denver Broncos to score a decent amount of points in this game. But I'm going to go Bills 31, Broncos 27. Yeah,
but holding the Broncos off, I guess, is your take. Not coming from behind to win.
Yeah, as long we're just staving them off, which might be even more stressful. Like, how many times is like, wish Josh Allen just had the ball in his hands at this last game situation, not the other way around. But that's just not the way it works if you're a Bills fan, because they just the universe wants us to be miserable. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Looking forward to this game, despite the anxiety that is currently just pulsating through my body, and will be as we get closer to kickoff. If you're looking to support this pregame show, there are 3 ways in which you can do it. Number 1, the easiest way, smash that like button. Helps us with the algorithm. Number 2 is you can click that share button, and you can copy the link to the show, share it on social media, text it to a friend, family, anyone you think might enjoy this Air Raid Hour Cover 1 pregame show. And then number 3, once the stream is over and the video is no longer live but on demand, going back in and just leaving some kind of comment in the comment section of the video, whether it's a take that you have, some comments about what we said, predictions, whatever it is, kind words, negative words, even negative words help as long as you don't hit the dislike button. Just leave a comment. That helps us as well. And you guys kill it as always. And again, a number of things that we didn't even think to talk about wasn't in our show notes, ended up on this show because of you guys in the comment section, killing it as always. So thank you guys so much. Dave, any final words before we get out of here?
I mean, were we too down today? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe it's just we're just anxious.
I'm just trying to be humble, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm not trying to be over the top and like overexcited and pounding my chest, because what is it that Bruce Nolan always tells us? Expectations minus reality equals disappointment. If I'm expecting the Buffalo Bills to go out there and curb stop the Denver Broncos today and then win the game 6-3, I will still be very, very happy, but I will also probably be dead. Like, again, it's the playoffs. I don't want to sit there and pound my chest and beat my chest. And I think Autumn Ari comes with a great comment. Nervous Mafia. Yeah. Like, we're Bills fans. This is Buffalo. Like, this is what you're going to get from most Bills fans in the postseason. But as Carl Thoman says, positive vibes. Get excited. I am excited. I just don't want to show it.
And my best friend's a Broncos fan, and he's coming over to my house today. So not only the Broncos going in the Highmark, my best friend's coming into my house today. And let me just tell you something. I do not want to be sitting there in my own house with this guy at the end of the game with him and the Broncos winning. Like, that's the last I want right now. So.
Scott Blakely comes in and says, "You nervous? We got Josh effing Allen." And I agree, but I shared a stat at the top of the show. In Allen's 5 career playoff losses, the opposing quarterbacks have led their team to an average of 31.5 points per game, while accounting for 13 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 120.7 quarterback rating. So, there.
It's the defense. I think the defense
football, baby. And to the defense's credit, like there are games where they have won us in the postseason. Like they beat the Broncos a couple of years ago. So it's a give and take, but typically when the Buffalo Bills exit in the postseason, it's not Josh Allen's fault. So yes, feeling pretty confident because of Josh Allen. And yeah, I might actually go back and as Claude Puig says here, I might go take a little nap before this game kicks off. So thank you guys so much. As always, you guys are the best. And until next time, and hopefully tomorrow is a victory Monday. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!